Marilyn Monroe, from broken dreams to Hollywood icon. Do you ever feel like no one sees the real you? Like you're wearing a mask just to survive? Let me tell you the story of a girl who had nothing, absolutely nothing, not even a family to call her own. She was passed from home to home, told she was unwanted, and grew up believing she would never matter to anyone. But through pain, determination, and an unstoppable desire to be loved, she became the most famous woman in the world. This girl is Marilyn Monroe, a name that has become a symbol of beauty, glamour, and Hollywood magic. But her story is not just about fame. It's about survival. It's about turning pain into power and showing the world that even the most broken people can shine. Today, we will walk through her journey. We'll talk about her childhood trauma, her struggles, her rise to stardom, and the price she paid for fame. By the time you finish this story, you'll not only know Marilyn Monroe's life, but you'll also understand that behind every beautiful smile, there might be a story of unimaginable pain. And remember, as we go along, keep learning new English words and phrases, just like Marilyn believed in reinventing herself every single day. The girl nobody wanted. Marilyn Monroe was born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926 in Los Angeles, California. But unlike Bill Gates or other successful people, Marilyn didn't have a loving family waiting for her. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, was a film cutter who worked in Hollywood, but she was unstable and struggled with severe mental illness. Norma Jean never knew who her real father was. Her mother refused to tell her, and this mystery haunted Marilyn for her entire life. Gladys couldn't take care of a baby. She was too poor, too unstable, and too lost in her own darkness. So just 2 weeks after Norma Jean was born, Gladys gave her away to a foster family, the Bollanders. Imagine being 2 weeks old and already unwanted. This would shape everything about Marilyn's life. The Bollanders were strict and religious. They weren't cruel, but they weren't warm either. They gave Norma Jean food and shelter, but not love. Little Norma Jean would look at other children with their mothers and wonder, why doesn't my mother want me? What's wrong with me? When Norma Jean was 7 years old, something happened that gave her hope. Her mother, Gladys, had saved enough money to rent a small house. She came to get Norma Jean, and for the first time in her life, the little girl thought, finally, I'm going to have a real home. Finally, my mother loves me. But here's the thing, happiness didn't last long. Just a few months later, Gladys had a complete mental breakdown. One day, Norma Jean came home from school and found her mother screaming and crying uncontrollably. Neighbors called the police, and Gladys was taken away to a psychiatric hospital. Norma Jean watched as her mother was dragged away, and in that moment, her childhood ended. With no one to care for her, Norma Jean was sent to an orphanage. Can you imagine how that must have felt? She was just 7 years old, standing at the gates of the Los Angeles Orphans' Home, holding a small bag with all her belongings. She looked up at the building and thought, this is where children nobody wants go. Life in the orphanage was hard. The children were fed and clothed, but there was no warmth, no comfort, no love. Norma Jean later said, I felt like I was invisible. I was just another unwanted child in a sea of unwanted children. At night, she would cry herself to sleep, wondering if anyone in the world would ever love her. But even in that darkness, something special was growing inside Norma Jean. She discovered movies. Once a week, the orphanage would take the children to see a film. And for Norma Jean, those 2 hours were magic. She would watch the actresses on screen, beautiful women who were loved and admired, and she would think, one day that will be me. One day people will love me too. After 2 years in the orphanage, Norma Jean was placed with her mother's friend, Grace. Grace was different from the others. She was kind, glamorous, and loved movies. She would tell Norma Jean, "You're going to be a star one day. You're special." For the first time, someone believed in her. Grace taught Norma Jean about beauty, style, and confidence. She would put makeup on the young girl's face and say, "See, you're beautiful. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." These words planted a seed in her heart. She started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be somebody. But once again, stability didn't last long. Grace got married, and her new husband didn't want Norma Jean around. So at the age of 11, Norma Jean was sent to live with another family, and then another, and then another. By the time she was a teenager, she had lived in 12 different homes. Each time she was moved, a piece of her heart broke a little more. One day when she was 12, something terrible happened. Norma Jean was sexually assaulted by one of her foster family's boarders. She was terrified and ashamed, but when she told the adults, they didn't believe her. They said she was lying, seeking attention. This betrayal cut deeper than anything else. She learned a painful lesson that day. The world is not a safe place for vulnerable girls. Despite all the pain, Norma Jean was not broken. She was a survivor. At school, she was shy and quiet, but she was also observant. She watched how the popular girls walked, talked, and smiled. She studied them like a scientist, learning the art of being noticed, being liked, being wanted. By the time she was 14, Norma Jean had grown into a beautiful young woman. Boys started noticing her, and for the first time, she felt powerful. She realized that her beauty could be a weapon, a tool to get what she needed: attention, affection, a way out of her painful life. In 1942, when Norma Jean was just 16 years old, Grace McKee suggested something that would change her life. Grace said, "Norma Jean, you need stability. You need a home. There's a nice young man, Jim Doherty, who likes you. Maybe you should marry him." Jim Doherty was 21 years old, handsome, and from a good family. He wasn't in love with Norma Jean, and she wasn't in love with him, but he offered her something she desperately needed: escape. Escape from foster homes, escape from being unwanted, escape from being alone. So on June 19, 1942, just 3 weeks after her 16th birthday, Norma Jean Mortensen became Norma Jean Doherty. She wore a simple white dress, smiled for the camera, and thought, "This is my chance at a normal life." The awakening, discovering her power. Marriage to Jim Doherty gave Norma Jean stability, but not happiness. Jim was a good man, but he was simple and traditional. He wanted a housewife who would cook, clean, and have babies. Norma Jean wanted more. She had dreams that were bigger than a small house in Van Nuys. During World War II, Jim joined the Merchant Marine and was sent overseas. Norma Jean was alone again, but this time she had an idea. She got a job at the Radioplane Company, a factory that made airplane parts for the war effort. It was hard work, but Norma Jean didn't mind. She was contributing, she was earning money, and she was independent. One day in 1944, something magical happened. A photographer named David Conover came to the factory. He was working for the military, taking pictures of women working in factories to boost morale for the troops. He saw Norma Jean on the assembly line, and he was captivated. He later said, "She had something special. The camera loved her." David asked Norma Jean if she would pose for some photographs. She was nervous but excited. When the photos were developed, everyone was amazed. Norma Jean looked radiant, confident, beautiful. David told her, "You should be a model. You have a gift." This was the moment Norma Jean had been waiting for her entire life. Someone saw her potential. Someone believed she could be more than just another forgotten girl. She started modeling, first for small magazines, then for bigger ones. With each photo shoot, her confidence grew. But here's what most people don't know. Norma Jean worked incredibly hard to perfect her look. She studied every photograph of herself, analyzing her angles, her expressions, her poses. She practiced in front of the mirror for hours, perfecting the smile that would later become iconic. She bleached her brown hair platinum blonde because she noticed that blonde models got more work. She wasn't just lucky, she was strategic. As her modeling career grew, her marriage to Jim fell apart. When Jim returned from the war, he was shocked to see what his wife had become. She wasn't the quiet, obedient girl he had married. She was confident, ambitious, and determined to be a star. Jim didn't like it. He wanted his wife at home, not in magazines. One evening, Jim said to her, "Norma Jean, you need to choose. It's either me or this crazy dream of yours." Norma Jean looked at him and said, "I choose my dream." In 1946, they divorced. She was 20 years old, alone again, but this time she wasn't afraid. She knew what she wanted, and she was going to get it. After the divorce, Norma Jean signed with the Blue Book modeling agency. Her agent, Emmeline Snively, saw her potential immediately. Emmeline said, "You have something special, but Norma Jean Doherty is not a star's name. You need something memorable, something that sounds like Hollywood." Together, they brainstormed names. Norma Jean remembered her mother's maiden name was Monroe. It sounded elegant, sophisticated. For the first name, Emmeline suggested Marilyn, after the Broadway star Marilyn Miller. And just like that, Norma Jean Doherty died, and Marilyn Monroe was born. This wasn't just a name change. It was a transformation. Marilyn wasn't just playing a character, she was creating a version of herself that the world would love. She once said, "I invented Marilyn Monroe. Norma Jean was too broken, too sad. Marilyn is confident, sexy, and happy. Marilyn is who I want to be." Breaking into Hollywood, the struggle for respect. In 1946, Marilyn signed her first contract with 20th Century Fox. She was thrilled. This was it, her big break. But here's the thing. Hollywood didn't make it easy for her. The studio saw her as just another pretty face, a girl to put in the background of movies, nothing more. For the next few years, Marilyn struggled. She got small roles, barely any lines, and no recognition. Studio executives would look at her and say, "You're beautiful, but can you act?" This question haunted her. She wanted to be taken seriously, but no one gave her a chance. Marilyn was dropped from her contract with Fox in 1947. She was devastated. She had no money, no job, and no prospects. She moved into a tiny apartment and survived on crackers and carrots. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe Jim was right. Maybe she should have just been a housewife. But Marilyn refused to give up. She started taking acting classes with Natasha Lytis, a respected drama coach. Natasha saw something in Marilyn that others didn't. Raw talent buried beneath insecurity. Marilyn was like a sponge, absorbing every lesson, every technique, every piece of advice. She worked harder than anyone else in the class. During this difficult time, Marilyn did something she later regretted but felt she had no choice about. To pay her bills, she posed nude for a calendar. The photographer, Tom Kelly, paid her $50. Marilyn needed the money desperately. She later said, "I was broke, and I had to eat. I'm not ashamed. I did what I had to do to survive." Years later, when Marilyn became famous, Those nude photos surfaced and caused a scandal. Reporters asked her, "Is it true you posed nude?" Marilyn could have denied it, but instead she looked at them and said, "Yes, it's true. And you know what? I'm proud that I survived." This honesty made the public love her even more. She wasn't pretending to be perfect. She was real. In 1948, Marilyn signed with Columbia Pictures. They put her in a forgettable movie called Ladies of the Chorus. She had a small singing role, and although the movie flopped, critics noticed her. One reviewer wrote, "Miss Monroe is pretty and has a pleasant voice." It wasn't much, but it was something. Columbia dropped her too, but Marilyn kept going. She attended every audition, knocked on every door, and refused to disappear. She met an agent named Johnny Hyde, who believed in her talent. Johnny was older, powerful, and deeply in love with Marilyn. He used his connections to get her auditions for better roles. Johnny got Marilyn a small but important role in the 1950 film The Asphalt Jungle. It was a crime drama, and Marilyn played the mistress of a crooked lawyer. She only had a few scenes, but she was mesmerizing. Audiences couldn't take their eyes off her. Directors started to notice. Maybe this blonde girl could act after all. The same year, she appeared in All About Eve, one of the greatest films ever made. Again, her role was small, but she made an impression. She was on the edge of something big. She could feel it. Then, tragedy struck. Johnny Hyde, the man who believed in her when no one else did, died of a heart attack in 1950. Marilyn was heartbroken. Johnny had asked her to marry him many times, but she refused because she didn't love him the way he loved her. Now he was gone, and she felt guilty and alone. But Johnny's death taught Marilyn an important lesson. Life is short, and opportunities don't last forever. She decided to fight harder than ever. She went back to 20th Century Fox and convinced them to give her another chance. This time, they did. The Rise, Becoming Marilyn Monroe. In 1952, everything changed. Marilyn was cast in a movie called Don't Bother to Knock, where she played a mentally disturbed babysitter. It was a dramatic role, and Marilyn poured her own pain into the character. Critics were divided, but audiences were fascinated. They had never seen Marilyn like this before. Then came Niagara in 1953. This was the role that turned Marilyn Monroe into a star. She played a femme fatale, seductive and dangerous. The camera loved her. The audience loved her. She walked across the screen with such confidence and sexuality that men couldn't look away and women wanted to be her. But here's what people didn't understand. Marilyn wasn't naturally confident. Before every scene, she was terrified. She would vomit from anxiety, shake with fear, and need constant reassurance from her acting coach, Natasha Lightis. But once the camera started rolling, she transformed. She became Marilyn, the goddess, the fantasy. In the same year, Marilyn starred in 2 movies that made her a superstar: Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire. In Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she sang "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend," wearing a pink dress and dripping with jewels. That image became iconic. Even today, that scene is what people think of when they hear the name Marilyn Monroe. Can you imagine? Just a few years earlier, she was broke and eating crackers for dinner. Now she was the biggest star in Hollywood. Her face was on every magazine cover. Men wanted to date her. Women wanted to look like her. She had achieved everything she dreamed of as a little girl in the orphanage. But with fame came a dark side. Studio executives saw Marilyn as a product, not a person. They controlled every aspect of her life: what she wore, what she said, who she dated. They gave her the same type of role over and over. The dumb blonde, the sex symbol, the girl who giggles and doesn't have a brain. Marilyn hated this. She once said, "I don't want to play the same dumb blonde all the time. I'm not dumb. I want to show the world that I can do more." But the studio didn't listen. They said, "Marilyn, the audience loves you as the dumb blonde. That's what sells tickets. Don't complain." This was heartbreaking for Marilyn. She had worked so hard to be taken seriously, but Hollywood only saw her as a body, a face, a fantasy. She started to resent the very thing that made her famous, her beauty. In 1954, at the peak of her fame, Marilyn did something unexpected. She married Joe DiMaggio, one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Joe was handsome, famous, and traditional. He wanted a wife, not a movie star. He was jealous of the attention Marilyn received and hated the way Hollywood treated her. Their marriage lasted only 9 months. The breaking point came when Marilyn filmed the famous scene from The 7-Year Itch, where she stood over a subway grate and her white dress flew up. Thousands of men gathered to watch, whistling and cheering. Joe was there, and he was furious. He couldn't stand seeing his wife being objectified by the world. After the divorce, Marilyn said, Joe loved Norma Jean, but he hated Marilyn Monroe. This is such a powerful statement. It shows the internal conflict Marilyn faced every day. She had created this persona, this fantasy, but in doing so, she had lost herself. The fight for respect, breaking the system. By 1955, Marilyn Monroe was the biggest star in Hollywood, but she was also one of the most unhappy. She was making millions of dollars for the studio, but she was being paid far less than male actors. She was given terrible scripts and treated like she didn't matter. One day, Marilyn made a bold decision. She walked away from Hollywood. In the middle of her contract, she moved to New York City and announced, "I'm not making any more movies until I get respect." This was unheard of. No actress had ever stood up to the studio system like this. The studio was furious. They threatened to sue her, to ruin her career. But Marilyn didn't back down. She said, "I'd rather have no career than be treated like a piece of meat." This took incredible courage. She was risking everything she had worked for, but she knew her worth. In New York, Marilyn did something that shocked everyone. She enrolled in the Actors Studio, the most prestigious acting school in America, run by Lee Strasberg. She studied alongside serious actors like Marlon Brando and James Dean. She wanted to prove to the world and to herself that she was more than just a pretty face. Lee Strasberg saw Marilyn's talent immediately. He said, "She has the potential to be one of the greatest actresses of her generation." For the first time in her life, Marilyn felt validated. Someone respected her as an artist, not just as a sex symbol. During this time, Marilyn also befriended some of the greatest intellectuals of the era. She dated the playwright Arthur Miller, a brilliant and respected writer. People were shocked. What would a genius like Arthur Miller see in a dumb blonde like Marilyn Monroe? But Arthur saw what others didn't. Marilyn was intelligent, well-read, and deeply thoughtful. In 1956, Marilyn married Arthur Miller. She hoped that this marriage would give her the stability and respect she craved. Arthur treated her like an equal, like an intellectual partner. For a while, she was happy. That same year, Marilyn returned to Hollywood on her own terms. She had negotiated a new contract with 20th Century Fox that gave her more money, more control, and the right to choose her own projects. She had won. Her first film back was Bus Stop in 1956. This was a serious role, a dramatic performance, and Marilyn was brilliant. Critics who had dismissed her as a dumb blonde were shocked. The New York Times wrote, Marilyn Monroe has finally proved herself as a serious actress. She had done it. She had earned their respect. The darkness, when fame becomes a prison. But here's what most people don't know. Behind the glamour and success, Marilyn was falling apart. The pressure of being Marilyn Monroe was crushing her. She struggled with depression, anxiety, and insomnia. She started taking pills, sleeping pills to fall asleep, pills to wake up, pills to calm her nerves. Marilyn became notorious for being late to set, sometimes hours late, sometimes not showing up at all. Directors and co-stars were frustrated with her. They didn't understand that Marilyn wasn't being difficult. She was terrified. Every time she had to perform, she felt like she wasn't good enough, like she was a fraud. Her marriage to Arthur Miller was also crumbling. Arthur had once adored her, but now he saw her as difficult and unstable. Marilyn found Arthur's diary one day and read something that broke her heart. Arthur had written that he was disappointed in her, that she wasn't the woman he thought she was. Marilyn was devastated. Once again, she wasn't good enough for someone she loved. In 1960, Marilyn made a film called Let's Make Love with Eve Montand. During filming, she had an affair with Eve, who was married. The affair ended badly, and Marilyn spiraled into depression. She was hospitalized for exhaustion, which was Hollywood's code word for a mental breakdown. By 1962, Marilyn was barely functioning. She was fired from the movie Something's Got to Give because she couldn't remember her lines and kept missing work. The studio released a statement saying she was unprofessional and difficult to work with. Marilyn's reputation was in ruins. But in the midst of this darkness, something beautiful happened. In May 1962, Marilyn was asked to sing Happy Birthday to President John F. Kennedy at Madison Square Garden. She wore a sheer, skin-tight dress covered in rhinestones and sang in her breathy, seductive voice. The performance was legendary. It was one of the most iconic moments in American pop culture. But behind the glamour, Marilyn was lonely and desperate. She had affairs with powerful men, including JFK and his brother Robert Kennedy, hoping they would love her, save her, make her feel worthy. But they didn't. They used her and discarded her, just like everyone else. The tragedy. When the night everything ended. On August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. She was just 36 years old. The official cause of death was ruled as a probable suicide from an overdose of barbiturates. The world was shocked. How could the most famous, most beautiful woman in the world be dead? But here's the thing. Marilyn's death has been surrounded by mystery and conspiracy theories for decades. Some people believe it was suicide. Others think it was an accidental overdose. And some believe she was murdered to keep her quiet about her affairs with the Kennedys. We may never know the truth, but what we do know is this. Marilyn Monroe was deeply unhappy. Despite having everything the world says should make you happy, beauty, fame, wealth, she was broken inside. The little girl who just wanted to be loved never truly felt loved, even when millions adored her. The day after her death, Joe DiMaggio, her ex-husband, took charge of her funeral. He banned everyone from Hollywood from attending. He said, "They destroyed her. They don't deserve to say goodbye." For the next 20 years, until his own death, Joe sent roses to Marilyn's grave 3 times a week. He never remarried. He never stopped loving her. Arthur Miller didn't attend the funeral, but years later he wrote, "She was the saddest person I ever knew." Lee Strasberg, her acting teacher, gave the eulogy. He said, "Marilyn Monroe was a legend in her own time, and legends never die." The legacy, more than just a sex symbol. Marilyn Monroe has been gone for over 60 years, but her image, her voice, and her story are still everywhere. She is one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Her image has been reproduced millions of times in art, fashion, and pop culture. But her legacy is complicated. On one hand, Marilyn is celebrated as a feminist icon, a woman who fought against the Hollywood system and demanded respect. She once said, "I don't mind living in a man's world as long as I can be a woman in it." She refused to be silenced or controlled. On the other hand, Marilyn is also seen as a tragic victim, a woman who was exploited, objectified, and destroyed by fame. Her story is a warning about the dark side of celebrity culture. But here's what we should remember about Marilyn Monroe. She was more than just a blonde bombshell. She was intelligent. She read Dostoevsky, Freud, and poetry. She was generous. She donated money anonymously to struggling actors in orphanages. She was brave. She stood up to the most powerful studio in Hollywood and won. Marilyn once said, "I'm not interested in money. I just want to be wonderful." This quote captures the essence of who she was. She didn't want wealth or power. She just wanted to be loved, to be seen, to matter. Her life teaches us several important lessons. 1. Beauty is not happiness. Marilyn was considered the most beautiful woman in the world, but she was deeply unhappy. True happiness comes from within, not from how you look or what others think of you. 2. Fame is not fulfillment. Marilyn achieved everything society told her would make her happy, but it wasn't enough. We need love, connection, and purpose to feel fulfilled. 3. Be authentic. Marilyn created a persona that the world loved, but in doing so, she lost herself. She once said, "It's better to be hated for what you are than loved for what you are not." 4. Your past does not define you. Marilyn had the worst childhood imaginable, but she didn't let it stop her. She transformed herself and became a legend. 5. Stand up for yourself. When Marilyn was mistreated by Hollywood, she walked away and demanded better. She showed that you should never accept less than you deserve. The complexity, understanding the real woman. One of the biggest misconceptions about Marilyn Monroe is that she was just a dumb blonde who got lucky. Nothing could be further from the truth. Marilyn was strategic, intelligent, and deeply self-aware. She understood exactly how Hollywood worked, and she played the game brilliantly. She once said, "I learned to walk as a baby, and I haven't had a lesson since." This was her way of explaining that everything about her public persona was carefully crafted. The breathy voice, the swaying walk, the giggly personality, all of it was performance art. But here's what made Marilyn different from other calculated stars. She never lied about it. She openly acknowledged that Marilyn Monroe was a character she created. She said, "If I'm going to be a symbol of something, I'd rather have it be sex than some other things they've got symbols of." Marilyn was also a complex person with contradictions. She was confident and insecure, generous and self-destructive, intelligent and naive. She contained multitudes just like all human beings do. But the world didn't want complexity from her. They wanted the fantasy. Her relationships with men reveal this complexity. She married 3 times, to Jim Doherty, a working-class man, Joe DiMaggio, a sports hero, and Arthur Miller, an intellectual. Each marriage represented a different part of herself she was trying to understand. But none of them worked because Marilyn was still searching for herself. The famous playwright Tennessee Williams, who knew Marilyn, once said, "She had the gift of conveying tragedy through comedy." This is evident in her best performances. In movies like Some Like It Hot and The 7-Year Itch, she made people laugh, but there was always a sadness underneath, a vulnerability that made her characters human. The impact, how she changed the world. Marilyn Monroe didn't just entertain people, she changed culture. Before Marilyn, sex appeal in Hollywood was subtle and hidden. Marilyn brought sexuality into the open. She celebrated it, owned it, and refused to be ashamed of it. She challenged the idea that women had to choose between being sexual and being intelligent. Marilyn read books, studied acting, and fought for better roles, all while embracing her sexuality. She showed that women could be both. Marilyn also changed the business of Hollywood. When she walked away from her contract and demanded better treatment, she paved the way for other actors to do the same. She proved that actors had power and shouldn't be treated like property by studios. Her influence on fashion and beauty is still felt today. The platinum blonde hair, red lips, and hourglass figure she popularized became the beauty standard for decades. Countless celebrities have imitated her look, from Madonna to Gwen Stefani to Kim Kardashian. But perhaps most importantly, Marilyn's tragic story changed how we talk about mental health and the price of fame. Her death forced people to acknowledge that celebrities are human beings with feelings, vulnerabilities, and struggles. It started conversations about depression, addiction, and the dark side of stardom. The mystery. Questions that remain. More than 60 years after her death, people are still fascinated by Marilyn Monroe. New books, documentaries, and movies about her are released every year. But many questions remain unanswered. Was her death really a suicide, or was it something more sinister? The official investigation was brief and inconclusive. There were inconsistencies in the timeline, missing evidence, and suspicious circumstances. Some investigators believe the truth was covered up to protect powerful people. What happened to her diary? Marilyn kept a detailed diary where she wrote about her relationships, including her affairs with the Kennedys. After her death, the diary disappeared and has never been found. What secrets did it contain? Would she have made a comeback? Just weeks before her death, Marilyn had been rehired by 20th Century Fox. They wanted to give her another chance. She was getting her life back together. If she had lived, would she have achieved the respect as an actress that she always wanted? These mysteries add to the legend of Marilyn Monroe, but they also distract from what's most important: her humanity, her talent, and the lessons we can learn from her life. The lessons. What Marilyn teaches us today. Marilyn Monroe's life was short, but it was full of profound lessons that are still relevant today. Survival is strength. Marilyn survived abandonment, abuse, poverty, and rejection. She turned her pain into art and her trauma into triumph. This teaches us that no matter how bad your start in life is, you can still create something beautiful. Perfection is a trap. Marilyn spent her entire life trying to be perfect. The perfect wife, the perfect star, the perfect woman. But perfection doesn't exist, and chasing it destroyed her. She once said, "Imperfection is beauty, madness is genius, and it's better to be absolutely ridiculous than absolutely boring." Know your worth. When Hollywood tried to exploit her, Marilyn walked away. She knew she deserved better, and she wasn't afraid to demand it. This is a lesson for anyone in any situation. Never accept less than you deserve. Be kind to yourself. Marilyn was her own worst critic. She never believed she was good enough, talented enough, or lovable enough. This self-doubt poisoned her life. We must learn to be gentler with ourselves and recognize our own worth. Fame doesn't equal happiness. This is perhaps the most important lesson. Marilyn had everything society says should make you happy, but she was miserable. True happiness comes from self-love, meaningful relationships, and purpose, not from external validation. Marilyn once wrote a poem that revealed her deepest feelings. Fame is fickle, and I know it. Fame hasn't really touched me yet. Even at the height of her fame, she felt like she hadn't achieved anything real. This breaks my heart because it shows that She never truly saw herself the way the world saw her. The final chapter. Remembering Norma Jean. At the end of the day, Marilyn Monroe's story is really the story of Norma Jean, the little girl who just wanted to be loved. Every role she played, every man she loved, every desperate attempt to be perfect, it all came back to that little girl in the orphanage, looking through the fence and wondering why nobody wanted her. Marilyn never escaped Norma Jean. In her final interview, just weeks before her death, she said, "I always felt I was a nobody, and the only way for me to be somebody was to be, well, somebody else, which is probably why I wanted to act." This is the tragedy of Marilyn Monroe. She created this goddess, this icon, this fantasy woman that the world worshipped. But in creating Marilyn, she lost Norma Jean, and Norma Jean was the one who needed love, acceptance, and healing. If Marilyn were alive today, what would we tell her? Maybe we'd say, "You are enough. You were always enough. Norma Jean was beautiful, talented, and worthy of love. You didn't need to become someone else. You didn't need to be perfect. You just needed to be you." The inspiration, what we can learn. Marilyn Monroe's life was tragic, but it was also triumphant. She rose from nothing to become everything. She broke barriers, challenged norms, and showed the world that a girl with no family, no money, and no advantages could become an icon.